Hi, I'm Zara. My parents called me a failure, then forced me to marry a man they described as broken, ugly, disposable. Not for love, just to shield their crumbling empire. They tried to hide me behind his wheelchair, erase me quietly. What they didn't know? He wasn't the nobody they assumed, and I wasn't the silent daughter they thought I was. Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. Stay with me. The twist left even them speechless. I hadn't planned on coming home, certainly not tonight, but after the investors pulled the plug on my lab, the little Prius drove itself from downtown Bellevue straight to my parents' driveway in Queen Anne. Early spring rain dotted the windshield, and for a full minute I just sat there, palms sweating on a cold steering wheel, pretending the porch light meant comfort. Mom opened the front door before I reached it. "Zara, darling, you look tired." Her eyes skimmed the wrinkled blazer I hadn't taken off in 2 days, then drifted past me as if checking to be sure no paparazzi lurked on the sidewalk. Inside, the dining room glittered. Crystal, silver chargers, lilies that smelled like a funeral. Dad stood at the head of the table, tie the color of bruised plums. My younger sister, Lila, the family's golden IPO, gave me a sympathetic half-smile from her seat. Mom thrust a garment bag into my arms. "We borrowed Lila's old cocktail dress. It should fit if you skip dessert." The words hit harder than the failed Series B call that morning. I inhaled, let the insult settle where it always did, under the breastbone, and followed her into the dining room. "Take a seat," Dad said, motioning to the chair directly across from him. A thick envelope rested on my plate like a warning. We began with small talk that wasn't small at all. Lila's latest award, the market reacting favorably to her skincare line, how Uncle Thomas's son just got engaged to an heiress with impeccable lineage. I forced nods, lips pressed thin. Dad clinked his glass. "Your mother and I have exciting news. We've secured a strategic alliance with the Fayed Group." My fork paused mid-air. The Fayed Group developed adaptive medical devices, the same space my startup just failed to disrupt. Dad went on. "To formalize the partnership, their heir, Rahim, will marry into our family." I waited for my parents to say Lila's name. Instead, they all turned toward me. Mom slid a framed photo across the table. A man about my age sat in a sleek wheelchair, a thin scar running from jawline to collar, eyes steady, almost kind. Dad tapped the frame. "Rahim has certain limitations, but he's exceptionally connected. A small price to restore the family's reputation after your recent missteps." My throat closed around words I couldn't choose fast enough. Lila avoided my gaze. Guilt flickered, then vanished. Mom laid the garment bag beside the envelope. "We'll announce the engagement Friday. Wear this. Dark navy is slimming." Heat crept up my neck. I thanked the ceiling for its silence. Instead of arguing, I excused myself and climbed the staircase I once raced up in squeaky sneakers. My childhood door stood open, room stripped bare. Boxes of holiday decor filled the space where a desk used to sit. I found my MIT diploma inside a cardboard carton, frame cracked, glass missing, folded behind a tangle of extension cords like a forgotten poster. I carried it to the guest room, the only place not commandeered for storage, and sank onto the edge of the twin bed. The envelope Dad had placed on my dinner plate slid from beneath my arm. Inside, a printed engagement contract, signatures missing only mine. At the bottom, a sticky note in Mom's looping script read, "Sign tonight. Courier leaves at 8 a.m. Lightning flashed beyond the window. In its brief glare, I caught my reflection. Hair damp, mascara ghosting under my eyes, dress bag crumpled at my feet like a surrendered flag. Silence has teeth, and it bit down hard, but I kept it. Because when your parents call you a liability, even breathing too loudly feels rebellious. Pen in hand, I stared at the empty signature line, thinking, was this the cost of peace? The contract blurred as my eyes adjusted to the dim guest room lamp, but I didn't sign. Instead, I flipped the pen between my fingers until sunrise bled through the blinds, then dialed the number Lila slipped under my door sometime after midnight, Rahim Fayed's personal assistant. In less than a minute, we scheduled coffee for Thursday morning, neutral ground, no photographers, no parents. I sent the assistant one line: "If he's late, I leave." She responded with a thumbs-up emoji that felt more judgmental than cheerful. 3 days crawled by. I filled them with divorce statistics, prenup clauses, and half a gallon of grocery store ice cream. At exactly 9:55 Thursday, I pushed through the glass door of a cafe wedged between a bookstore and an orthodontist's office in downtown Seattle. Smell of roasted beans, low jazz. Rahim was already there, wheelchair parked at a corner table, navy sweater, hair neatly cropped. He rose, or tried to, and I realized the chair was motorized. He tilted a polite nod instead. "Zara?" His voice was softer than I expected, no strain, almost soothing. A barista handed him 2 cups. He slid one toward me. "Triple shot, oat milk, 1 pump vanilla. Hope that's still your poison." I had never told anyone my exact coffee order, not even Lila. The fact that he knew pricked my spine. "Either you're psychic or my parents overshared." He smiled, faint, almost apologetic. "I read your interview in Biotech Northwest. You mentioned caffeine chemistry and a sweet tooth. It wasn't hard to reverse engineer. I sipped anyway. Perfect. Annoying." "Let's get to it. Your family wants a merger, mine wants salvation, and apparently I'm the human handshake." He folded his hands on the table, fingers long and scarred across the knuckles. "I dislike being anyone's savior. My condition already makes people uncomfortable. I won't add pity to the list." "Your condition?" I echoed, glancing at the chair. "Spinal injury 7 years ago. I manage. It doesn't define me." He reached into a leather folio, pulled out a document with my name on the cover. "This is a prenuptial agreement drafted by my legal team. It voids itself if you ever feel trapped. No penalties, full financial independence, ongoing medical coverage for any future children, and 0 claim on your current or future assets." My laugh came out brittle. "You realize a prenup that favors me entirely is suspicious." "Suspicion keeps smart people alive," he said calmly. "Read it, then burn it if you want. I won't chase." I scanned the first page. No hidden clauses, no percentages, just exit doors marked in bold. "Why hand me an escape hatch?" "Because everyone else seems intent on locking you in." He lifted his cup. "And because I don't need your father's company. The board thinks I do, but numbers rarely tell the whole story." My stomach dipped. "Then why agree at all?" He hesitated, gaze drifting to the street where drizzle painted wavering reflections of headlights. "I respect your research on neural interface grafts. My firm invests in adaptive tech, and your approach deserved funding. When your investors pulled out, I bought the patents." Air left my lungs. "Those patents are dormant." "They're waiting," he corrected. "Like you." His eyes met mine, steady, unreadable. "I'm offering partnership, not ownership. If that frightens you, walk away." Somewhere behind the espresso machine, beans ground loudly. The sound felt like a countdown. I forced composure. "You quote interviews I barely remember, no unpublished work, and gift me legal emancipation. Either you're the most considerate stranger alive, or a magician." "Magicians deceive," he said, easing back. "I prefer transparency." I closed the folio, heart thudding. Transparency would include why my parents begged for this union while trash-talking you at every charity gala. "That," he admitted, "is a story only they can tell." He glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting across town. Keep the document. Decide on your timeline, not theirs." We exchanged a cordial handshake, his grip firm, not pitying. He maneuvered the chair smoothly toward the exit, pausing once. "You're not a handshake, Zara. You're the whole deal." Then he disappeared into the gray morning. I remained at the table, staring at ink that offered freedom instead of chains, wondering if generosity could be its own disguise. Folding the prenup, I slipped it into my tote, tipped the barista, and stepped outside. Fine rain kissed my face as traffic hissed along the curb. The cafe door shut behind me with a final ding, leaving only the hum of the city and one unsettling question. I walked out into the drizzle, clutching the paper, and wondering who exactly I was marrying. Drizzle soaked the collar of my coat before I found my car, but the damp couldn't compete with the unease simmering under my ribs. I tossed the pristine prenup onto the passenger seat and drove home through a blur of brake lights, replaying Raheem's parting words. "You're the whole deal. Compliment or warning?" Back in my apartment, I stuck the document under a stack of unpaid lab invoices, made tea, and opened my laptop. If I was expected to form a life with this man, I needed facts, not parental propaganda. Google offered little more than charity gala photos and a decade-old article labeling him the silent philanthropist. Social media? A ghost town. Even LinkedIn only showed a bare profile. Consultant? Seattle. I dug deeper. Academic journals mentioned a R. Fayed financing a regenerative medicine prize. An SEC filing listed a holding company, Arcus Ventures, owning 42% of the Fayed Group, signature unreadable. 42, that wasn't desperation, that was control. The kettle clicked off. I ignored it, fingers flying across keys, cross-referencing board minutes, charity ledgers, patent databases. At 3 a.m., my screen filled with a dusty PDF from Biotech Northwest's archives. Keynote underwriter, Arcus Ventures, majority partner, Raheem K. Fayed. Majority. My parents had painted him as a stranded prince looking for a ladder. They'd left out the part where he owned the castle. Sleep never came. At sunrise, I called Mara Davidson, a former colleague now running the registration desk at the Cascadia Biotech Summit. "Off the record," I said. "What do you know about Arcus Ventures?" Her voice dropped. "Rumor is one man funds almost everything. Quiet, ruthless, gives grants then vanishes." She inhaled. "Why do you ask?" "No reason," I lied, thanking her before she pressed further. The line went dead. Coffee number 3 in hand, I sat on my bedroom floor, memories circling like gnats. 10 years earlier, a hotel ballroom in San Francisco, chandeliers like upside-down icebergs. Dad had refused a handshake from a petite woman in emerald silk, Raheem's mother, I realize now, murmuring to Mom, "Money can't buy pedigree." I'd felt heat in my cheeks back then, ashamed without knowing why. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house with tempered fury. Mom met me in the foyer, pearl earrings in place. "If you're here to thank us, sweetie, the wedding planner arrives at—" "I found out who Raheem really is," I said, voice steady. "You lied." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "We protected you from disappointment." "No, you protected your balance sheet." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle in her blouse. "Ancient history, Zara. Water under the bridge." "Funny," I said, "it still reeks." Dad entered, phone pressed to his ear, eyebrow lifted. Mom waved him off. "Your sister's interview is on Channel 7. Don't ruin her moment." I followed their voices down the hall toward Dad's study. The door was ajar. I paused when I heard my own name. Dad's tone was hushed but firm. "She needs another reality check. We didn't want her hitting the summit too early. Let her taste failure. It builds humility." Mom answered, sharp whisper. "The marriage will cage her long enough. After that, Raheem can keep her busy with charity work." Humility. Cage. Busy. I backed away before the floorboards tattled. In my old room, now a storage closet, I found the cracked MIT frame again. Glass shards were gone, but dust coated the matting, dulling the gold seal. I slid the diploma from its frame, rolled it tight, and tucked it into my tote along with 2 changes of clothes. No slamming doors, no shouted goodbyes, just the soft click of the front latch as I stepped into late afternoon light. I drove until city towers shrank behind me, stopping at a roadside motel off I-5. The room smelled of bleach and old air conditioner coils. I set my bag on the single chair, faced the mirror above the sink. Raindrops streaked my hair, eyes rimmed red but dry. I wasn't the sacrifice, I whispered to the glass. I was the apology. I stared at the ceiling of the motel room as the air conditioner rattled on low. I hadn't slept, not really, just drifted in and out of a fog where my mother's voice clashed with the whisper from Rahim's summit file. Majority partner. 5 days passed. I didn't go home. I booked a co-working space for my research, ate yogurt from the fridge in the hallway, and ignored every text from Mom. One from Dad simply said, "Keep your head. It's a family arrangement, not a love story." Then, Rahim called. "We're hosting a dinner," he said evenly. "My father's cousins, some board members. It's formal. I'd like you there." His tone didn't hint at apology or care, just business. I hesitated. Am I expected to say something? No. Just be seen. Be seen, not heard, not acknowledged, just present. Still, I said yes. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I still thought there was dignity to reclaim if I showed up as the composed version of myself, the one they couldn't ignore. The night of the dinner, I stood in front of the mirror of a boutique bathroom in downtown Vancouver. The gown was emerald, sleek with long sleeves. I tied my hair in a low chignon, sprayed it in place. A quiet kind of armor. My ride arrived at 6:45 sharp. The venue was carved out of glass and marble, a private wing of an old French-style hotel by the harbor. The valet took my wrap without a word. I stepped inside, smoothing my clutch against my side like it might deflect whatever I was walking into. Rahim wasn't there. A server with a crisp white apron glanced at me, puzzled. "Are you... press?" "No, I'm with the Fayed party." He checked a digital list on his iPad, tapped, scrolled, blinked. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see your name." "It's Zara," I said carefully. "Zara Mirza." He bit his lip. "Maybe check with the head table?" The room opened before me like a scene from a political fundraiser. Crystal chandeliers. Men in tuxedos, women in gowns worth more than my college tuition. Conversations hovered at a hum just above jazz playing from a string quartet. I walked toward the long head table, set under a canopy of hanging lights. There were place cards, Rahim's name, his father, his uncle, cousins. No Mirza, no Zara. A woman in her 60s brushed past me, perfume sharp with vetiver. She glanced once, then leaned toward another woman in royal blue. Their conversation halted. They both turned their eyes down to their drinks. I stepped aside, heart hammering against my ribs. A server passed with a tray of champagne. He didn't offer me one. A moment later, a woman in a gold sari approached. Tall, poised, eyes lined in kohl and age. She looked like someone who didn't raise her voice because she never needed to. "You're the girl from Seattle," she said, voice like dry silk. I nodded. "Zara." She offered a tight smile. "Your mother wanted this very badly. I suppose that's understandable." "I was told this was a welcome dinner." She glanced at the head table. "It is. For family." Her eyes met mine again. "You weren't his first choice, dear. You're here because your parents begged." Before I could react, she glided past me and vanished into the cluster of relatives now laughing at something one of the cousins said. I stood there, still, like an extra who'd wandered onto the wrong set. People looked through me, not in cruelty but indifference, as if I didn't belong. After what felt like hours but was likely 10 minutes, I turned and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked on the polished floor like punctuation marks, sharp and deliberate. Outside, the air hit colder than I expected. I didn't wait for valet. I walked. Past the line of black cars, past the fountain flickering with light. No one called my name. If they weren't going to give me a chair, then I'd build my own table. The Vancouver sidewalk glistened under street lamps as I passed the line of idling town cars. My pulse slowed with each step, anger coiling into something tighter, colder, resolve. If people could erase me in public, I could just as easily erase any need for their approval. 2 days later, Rahim texted, "I'd like to talk." 8 o'clock, my place. "Car will pick you up." No apology, no mention of the empty chair. I almost declined, then thought better. If I was building my own table, I needed to know who might try to pull the legs out from under it. The elevator to his penthouse opened on a silent foyer lit by recessed LEDs. Pale hardwood stretched toward glass walls revealing the harbor, a postcard view framed by steel and sky. A faint scent of cedar lingered, clean and impersonal. Rahim waited near a low marble coffee table, suit jacket folded neatly over the arm of a charcoal sofa. "Thanks for coming," he said, remote in hand as he muted classical music streaming from invisible speakers. He gestured toward a leather chair that looked as if no one had ever sat in it. I took the offered seat. The cushion barely sighed beneath me. My gaze drifted. No family portraits, no vacation souvenirs, not even a stray magazine, just sleek lines and monochrome art that whispered, "No attachments live here." Outside, ferries cut pearls of white across dark water. Rahim poured 2 cups of green tea. I noticed the slight tremor in his fingers as he set my cup on a coaster. "About the dinner," he began, eyes fixed on the steam. The seating was arranged by my aunt without my oversight. I arrived late from a board call. "I learned plenty standing," I replied, keeping my tone flat. "Your aunt made sure I understood my placement." He inhaled, slow. "She spoke out of turn." "Maybe she spoke for the room." I let a beat pass. "Why invite me tonight?" "Because you deserve context," he said. He shifted in his wheelchair, small movement, as if the question made him restless. "My relatives value lineage above logic. They see alliances as transactions measured in status, not competence." He hesitated. "I didn't choose their tactics, but I did choose not to fight them that night. For that, I'm sorry." It wasn't a grand apology, yet something in his voice felt genuine, almost weary. I nodded once, accepting but not absolving. Conversation drifted to safe subjects, housing markets, sea lions that sometimes barked along the pier at dawn. Still, his answers skirted depth, each one polished smooth before it reached me. When his phone vibrated, he excused himself to the balcony to take the call in private. I stood, restless, and walked toward a stately walnut console along the wall. One drawer sat slightly ajar, as if invitation or oversight. Now curiosity beat good manners by a nose. I eased it open. Inside lay a single ivory folder. My family's law firm logo embossed in gold on the corner twisted my gut. I pulled the folder free and flipped it open. Letterhead. Multiple pages. The first dated 2 months ago, drafted by my parents' chief counsel. "We believe integrating Zara Mirza into the Fayed household prior to further public attention will mitigate reputational risk. Our client will compensate your organization via expedited licensing and a 6% equity concession, contingent upon Ms. Mirza's quiet withdrawal from professional endeavors that may yield negative press." The next letter added sweeteners, stock options, charitable foundations honoring the Fayed name, if Rahim would assume full guardianship of my public image before the company's brand sustains further damage. Guardianship. Damage. I steadied myself against the console, throat tight but eyes dry. Each word reduced me to salvage merchandise, bundled with perks, shipped off for corporate clearance. Steps approached. I slipped the folder back, nudging the drawer to its earlier gap. When Rahim re-entered, wind had mussed his hair, and his brows furrowed with whatever news he'd received. He didn't notice my hands tremble as I accepted the tea he offered. "Everything all right?" I asked, surprised at the steadiness of my own voice. "Just a logistics issue with manufacturing," he said, sitting opposite me again. "Nothing you need to worry about." Silence stretched. I sipped. Liquid warm, taste suddenly metallic. He met my gaze. "I don't intend for you to feel trapped here or anywhere." "And yet," I answered softly, "traps aren't always visible. Sometimes they're paper and ink." He studied me, perhaps sensing the shift but unsure of its source. "If you choose to leave," he said finally, "the offer in the prenup stands unchanged. No penalties." I set the cup down, careful not to rattle china. "Thank you for the tea," I should go. He nodded, maybe relieved, maybe confused. At the elevator, I paused to observe the living room once more. The flawless surfaces, the art that could belong to anyone. A life curated to avoid fingerprints. Downstairs, the doorman hailed a cab before I asked. I slid into the back seat, the city's neon reflecting on the window like bruises in color. My fingertips still tingled from touching that folder. They didn't marry me off. They gave me away like I was broken. And yet, somehow, I was still standing. I barely remembered the cab ride to Woodinville. Just the hum of the tires, the occasional flicker of passing vineyards in the dark, and the sharp ache at the base of my neck that no stretch could relieve. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't want a welcome. I just needed somewhere to breathe where no one expected me to perform. When the car stopped at the gated drive of my parents' estate, the lights in the main house were still on. It was just after 9 p.m. The driver gave me a curious glance as I stepped out in silence, my overnight bag slung across my shoulder. The front gate recognized my phone code and opened without resistance, like muscle memory. That part of my life still remembered me, even if the people inside didn't. The housekeeper, Elda, opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she said nothing. Just stepped back, let me in, and murmured, "I'll tell Mrs. Mirza you've arrived." Then she disappeared down the hallway. The foyer smelled the same, fresh-cut lilies and furniture polish, but the walls had changed. The gallery of family photos was gone. In its place hung large, abstract canvases in sterile tones. No smiles, no memories, just expensive silence. I climbed the stairs slowly, already knowing something would be off. But still, I wasn't ready. My old bedroom door was open, and the first thing I saw were cardboard boxes. Dozens of them, stacked high. Office files, winter coats, unused kitchen appliances in their original packaging. The floral wallpaper was gone, painted over in flat white. My bed? Replaced by a metal shelving unit. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood in the doorway, breathing as shallowly as I could, willing myself not to fall apart. Not here. My mother's voice floated behind me, sharp and dry. "You're not staying in there. That room's been converted." I turned. She was wearing one of her silky house robes, her hair perfectly pulled back, face bare but alert. Not tired, just disinterested. Her gaze didn't waver. "That chapter's over, dear. You're someone else's problem now." There it was. Neat. Surgical. I swallowed the 1,000 things I could have said. Instead, I nodded once. "Can I stay in the guest house tonight?" She sighed, the kind reserved for inconvenient weather forecasts. "As long as you don't cause drama." "No plans to," I said, and walked back down the stairs with the same pace I'd climbed them. Controlled, measured, not weak. The guest house behind the main estate had been built when my grandparents lived here. It was cozy once, 2 bedrooms, a small fireplace, windows that overlooked the garden. I hadn't stayed in it since college. The lock clicked easily, and inside, the air was still. No one had used it in a while. I set my bag down, turned on one lamp, and plugged in my phone. The battery was nearly dead. I collapsed onto the edge of the daybed and stared at the ceiling, letting the silence fill every space that had been emptied upstairs. Then I heard voices, faint, tinny, coming from the old intercom unit mounted above the fireplace. I hadn't thought about that thing in years. It used to link every building on the property, including the kitchen and both garages. I stood and moved closer. The volume was just high enough to hear. My father's voice, low but crisp. "She's back at the estate. Didn't even knock. Just walked in like she still belongs." Then my mother, "She's too fragile to push back. It won't take much longer, just hold your line. Once the merger is complete, she'll have no leverage." A pause. Another voice, male, unfamiliar, probably Rahim's attorney. "She seemed a bit colder this time," he said. "Less compliant." "She's worn down," my mother replied. "She always was. She flares up, then folds. Give it a few weeks." My hand clenched around the frame of the couch. I didn't sit. I didn't pace. I just listened, every cell in my body suspended. They had no intention of including me in any future. They'd written me off as an emotional liability, a pawn to shift and sacrifice as needed. They were counting on me to break. When the voices faded, I reached up and turned the intercom off. Then I walked across the room and turned off the lamp. The dark didn't scare me anymore, not like this kind of light. I stood at the window. Outside, the vines stretched long under the moonlight, orderly rows rooted in someone else's legacy. They think I won't fight. Let's give them a reason to think again. By dawn, I hadn't slept. The vineyard outside the guest house faded from silver to gray to gold, but I just stood there, watching it shift, feeling the weight of everything I'd overheard press into my chest like a boulder that refused to roll off. I didn't cry. Instead, I made coffee from an old tin left in the guest house pantry, took a long shower, and packed my bag again. The silence had done its job. It carved away every last illusion I had left. By 10 a.m., I was on the road to Seattle. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, not even her, but I remembered the route to the law school like it was yesterday. Parking was tight in the U District, but I found a spot just off 17th and walked the rest. My steps were calm, deliberate. The longer I walked, the more the plan formed, not out of rage, but clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming truth. Professor Langford's office sat tucked inside the upper floor of the old brick building. She was in her mid-60s now, retired from full-time teaching, but still mentoring on corporate governance cases. She'd once told me, "Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it signs in ink at the bottom of the contract." I knocked twice. Her door opened partway before I even heard her speak. Well, she said, adjusting her glasses. "Look what the wind brought back." I gave a soft smile. "Hi, Professor." She stepped aside, gesturing me in with that familiar elegance she always carried, spine straight, voice steady, no nonsense. Her office hadn't changed. Framed credentials, a photograph of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the bookshelf, and 2 mugs, one cracked and glued, the other brand new. We sat. I didn't fumble or hesitate. I told her everything. About the arrangement, the merger, the lies, the night in the guest house. She listened, hands folded, lips pursed, eyes sharp. When I finished, she didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "That's awful." She simply said, "You still have agency, you just have to choose how you wield it." That landed deeper than sympathy ever could. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin folder. I kept my credentials, quietly, renewed every year. I completed a dual track, business law. Didn't tell anyone but the registrar. Langford raised her brows. Funded how? Grants, endowments, some late-night consulting gigs on the side. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. She nodded slowly. You planned for a day you didn't even know would come. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We walked together down to the legal archives wing. Most students didn't even know it existed, rows of locked file cabinets and old merger documentation going back decades. Langford had the clearance. She typed in her code and we entered a dim room that smelled of paper and steel. We combed through the folder labeled Mirza Holdings, Kotri Biotech, Joint Integration Proposal, Confidential Drafts. There, buried between appendices and revisions, was what I needed. They listed your marital status, Langford murmured, as an asset to lower shareholder litigation risk. I leaned closer and used my name to fulfill the spousal majority clause on a protective provision, without my informed consent. Langford tapped the edge of the page. That's where you begin. We spent the next 3 hours drafting a preliminary objection and an independent audit request, not to blow anything up yet, but to signal legal awareness. I based it on a shareholder spouse trigger buried in Clause 6.4 of the acquisition plan, one only someone with legal standing through marriage could submit. By mid-afternoon, I folded the document neatly, slid it into a cream envelope, and slipped it into my bag. Langford watched me, her voice lower now. Do you want me to notify counsel? I shook my head. Not yet. I stood, slung my bag back over my shoulder, and looked at the photo of Ginsburg again. Then I met her eyes and said, "This time they'll feel what it's like to be underestimated." I left Professor Langford's office with the envelope tucked against my ribcage like a second heart, and by Friday morning I was standing in the elevator of Mirza Fayed Tower, 22nd floor, watching the numbers climb. No entourage, no lipstick, just a navy suit and the calm that comes after a forest fire has already burned everything you loved. When the doors slid open, conversation inside the glass-walled boardroom faltered. My mother's hand froze mid-gesture. My father rose so suddenly his chair skidded back. Rahim, at the far end, gripped the arms of his wheelchair. Color drained from his face, though his expression stayed carved from stone. I walked the length of the polished table, every heel strike a metronome. When I reached the open seat marked General Counsel, vacant, I set my folder down and remained standing. "Good morning," I said. "I'm Zahra Mirza Fayed, spousal shareholder, 15% voting weight. I'm here to exercise Clause 6.4. Whispers rippled like wind through wheat. The CFO frowned at his tablet. Evidently, my name was not on the agenda. I slid copies of my motion down the table, page after page, until each director had one. "You'll see an immediate request for an independent audit and temporary injunction against the merger until spousal due diligence violations are addressed." My mother found her voice first. "Zahra, sweetheart, this isn't the place." "It's exactly the place, and I prefer Ms. Mirza Fayed in this room, thank you." Rahim cleared his throat. "You're misunderstanding the financial exposure, Zahra. Perhaps we can discuss privately." "Transparency is healthier," I replied, and gestured to the chairman. "Please add my motion to the record." The chairman, a gray-haired man named Collins, who once complimented my science fair project when I was 16, nodded slowly. "We'll consider it after standard reports." Rahim clicked a remote. A screen behind him lit up with grainy security footage. Me, 3 weeks ago sitting on a park bench, tears streaking mascara while I clutched an empty coffee cup. Caption, "Subject experiencing emotional instability." A murmur of concern floated around the table. Rahim's voice stayed smooth. "We must weigh the credibility of a challenge filed by someone under clear psychological distress." I didn't flinch. "Play the rest," I said. He hesitated, thumb hovering. The clip cut, abrupt, incriminating. I opened my folder, withdrew a sealed envelope and handed it to Collins. "Full, notarized evaluation from Dr. Alexa Green, board-certified psychiatrist, conducted 3 days after that footage, at my request, confirming my decisional capacity." Collins broke the seal, scanned the top page, then slid it down the line. Heads bent. One director, a woman with silver curls and shrewd eyes, looked up and asked, "Mr. Fayed, why present an edited clip when a full medical review exists?" Rahim's jaw twitched. "I wasn't aware of the evaluation." I met his gaze. "Perhaps your team should vet sources as carefully as they vet spouses." Silence swelled, then cracked when Director Patel pushed his chair back and stood. "She's not the liability here. She's the oversight we needed." A motion to vote was called. Hands rose. 3, 4, 5, tied at 5-5. All eyes shifted to Collins. He hesitated just long enough for my pulse to throb in my ears, then lifted his hand. "Motion carries, audit approved, merger frozen pending findings." Paper rustled. My mother exhaled a sharp, wounded breath. My father stared at the tabletop. Rahim rolled his chair backward, the leather squeaking like a warning. He met me at the room's edge, voice low enough for only me to hear. "You'll regret this." He hurled the threat across the table, but I carried it out of the building like an empty envelope, weightless once opened. Still, I knew retaliation rarely arrived through the front door. It leaked in through side channels, lawyers, press leaks, hushed phone calls, so I stayed ahead of the current. 2 days after the standoff, the auditors set up shop on the 22nd floor. Neutral suits, patients of monks. They requested access, not permission, and I granted both. handing over every password and shadow contract I'd uncovered with Professor Langford. My parents tried to barge into the data room. Security stopped them kindly but firmly. Rahim never showed. His nameplate vanished from the executive directory by the end of week 2. By week 3, findings filled 3 binders: forged signatures on licensing agreements, shell companies holding my marital share, clauses tying my good behavior to accelerated stock options for the Mirza board. Misuse, the lead auditor called it. Egregious, calculated misuse. The board convened again in the same glass room. Collins read the summary aloud. Faces around the table paled, then flushed. My father kept smoothing his tie. My mother's nails drum-tapped the armrest. Rahim dialed in from an undisclosed number. The red light blinked, but he never spoke. A concise resolution followed. Immediate resignations from both patriarchs, restitution paid in assets, not cash. Among them, the real estate portfolio I'd drafted years earlier in secret sketches, buildings designed for community clinics and small business spaces, projects my parents shelved as non-essential. Now they were mine, in full. "Sign here," Collins said, sliding the transfer deed forward. I signed with steady hand. One flourish, my handwriting clear, unhurried. No one else tried to stop me. The gavel of corporate justice seldom sounded so quietly. That night I drafted a single-page letter to Rahim. This is closure, not forgiveness. I folded it around the deed copies and left the envelope with the marble desk receptionist outside his penthouse. She glanced at the return address, then at me, but asked nothing. He never replied. I didn't need him to. The ribbon cutting for Harbor Light Women's Incubator landed on a crisp Saturday at the edge of spring. The renovated brick building overlooked Elliott Bay, its windows throwing back sunlight in wide, generous sheets. Volunteers strung blue and silver balloons. City Council sent a small band. I stood beside the entrance arch, the same old teal scarf looped at my throat, the one my mother once called outdated and poor. Its fabric fluttered in the salty breeze like it remembered every slight and chose to rise anyway. Reporters gathered. One held out a microphone. "Ms. Mirza Fayed, why launch a center like this now?" I smiled, fingered the frayed hem of the scarf, and answered, "Because no one should have to be silent to be seen as worthy." Camera shutters clicked. Applause scattered through the crowd, not roaring but warm, genuine. I accepted a pair of oversized ceremonial scissors and sliced the ribbon. Cheering swelled, and the doors swung open to reveal bright co-working rooms, childcare nooks, a studio for prototyping, spaces I'd longed to build when nobody was listening. My mother did not attend. My father sent a terse email wishing me future success. Rahim's seat remained vacant. I'd left it on the invitation list out of courtesy, or maybe curiosity. Either way, the empty chair spoke volumes. Some lessons only echo in absence. As guests drifted inside, Christina, one of the first grant recipients, tugged my sleeve and pointed toward the harbor. The sun hovered exactly where water met sky, turning waves into burning copper. I walked to the balcony rail, breathing briny air thick with gull cries and distant ferry horns. Hand resting on the cool steel, I let the view settle in my bones. The scarf lifted, caught a gust, and snapped back against my shoulder. Steady, resilient, stubborn, just like its owner. And as the sun touched the waterline behind me, I whispered, only for myself, I was never the failure.